This podcast is brought to you by B2B Better. Most B2B podcasts rack up downloads, but they never move the needle on pipeline. At B2B Better, we build own media systems that sales teams actually use to close deals. We've helped companies turn their podcasts into revenue engines, shortening sales cycles, improving outbound reply rates, and directly influencing millions in pipeline. So if you're tired of content that looks good on paper, but doesn't drive business results, visit b2b-better.com to see how we do it differently. Welcome back to another episode of Pipe Dream and our 1 and 100 series. I'm very excited today to be joined by a gentleman who I've known seemingly for years, at least in the kind of former marketing Twitter sphere and on LinkedIn subsequently. But only recently have we actually had the opportunity to connect a couple of times on calls. And in spending some time with him and learning about his experience in the kind of B2C financial services space, I thought, what a great individual to bring onto the show to tell us B2B marketers how we're doing it all wrong and we could be doing it much, much better. So welcome, Richard Dedor, to Pipe Dream.
Happy to be here. And thanks for the introduction, Jason, and please keep listening, everyone, because I think we all can learn from each other. But yeah, I've spent almost a decade on the financial services side, but all B2C, and so we're all here to learn. I've been an active listener of the team's work, because I think we all can learn from each other, whether it's B2B, B2C, whatever your product is, because creativity is creativity. So before coming to the financial services space, was in the real estate marketing space, also heavily regulated, and then just nonprofit work before that. So it's been a journey, but I love working in a space that's regulated because you get to challenge yourself to think outside the very tight box.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. We can all be learning from each other. And, I actually love, speaking to marketers of every kind of, from all sorts of different walks of life, because, some of the best campaigns that I've run as a B2B marketer have taken inspiration from products that I just use in my everyday life, like bike cleaner, for example. But one of the things that kind of comes to mind to me when I'm thinking about kind of credit unions, banks, fintech, which is where you spent a lot of at least your recent career, is with these organizations, they're all kind of offering the same rates or the same products. When you were in your previous role, as kind of a marketing lead, how did you think about differentiation, and like how did you actually go about differentiating your products when they look, feel, and perhaps sound the same as your nearest competitors?
It's the great question, and it's not a new one for financial services. But what I always told my team, and I still say it today, and I'll tell it to your audience, is you've got McDonald's and Wendy's and Burger King, and here in Southern California, you've got In-N-Out and The Habit. They're all selling a cheeseburger, right? They make it differently. Their flavors are different. And that's how, in the financial services space, whether you're a traditional FI, a fintech, it's all about what are the ingredients that make you just a little bit different, a little bit tastier for your ideal customer. And then leaning into that through the stories that you tell and the value prop that you put out there, because at the end of the day, it is a checking account, it is a debit card, it is a credit card, right? But if you understand who your true target market is, and what their problem is, then you can create that differentiation. And so to go back to the cheeseburger analogy, if you need a quick burger in 2 minutes that tastes at best average, you go to the McDonald's drive-thru. But if you want a good fast burger where you're gonna have consistency every time and you're willing to wait 10 or 15 minutes, you go to In-N-Out, right? So there's just understanding what you're looking for is really where the true work comes in financial services.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I would push back a little bit on Big Macs being average at best. They got me through university, but the rest of what you said, I completely agree with. Here on Pipe Dream, we love talking in kind of metrics and numbers where we can. And one of the things that kind of stood out to me was how in your previous role, you said that you were able to kind of grow brand awareness by 50%, but in financial services, awareness doesn't really mean much if it doesn't kind of convert, if it doesn't actually mean people are switching accounts. So what did that mean for you? Like, how did you bridge that gap between awareness to actually kind of converting customers into business?
Yeah, like it's a great call out that you need the brand awareness to have people be willing to make that change because you're only going to change, much like you're only going to buy a new car 4 or 5 times in your life, right? Um, Same thing with checking accounts. Like you're only going to change your checking account a couple of times. Sometimes it's a new job. Sometimes you move to a place and the bank is no longer in your new town. So those opportunities are fleeting. And so when we increase that brand awareness, you needed to do that, right? So that when people are in market, that they know you exist and they know your value, right? Why go to this street corner versus that street corner versus that street corner to open up something that I need? I don't want to deal with it, right? And so it's all about going back to the previous comment, understanding who you want to serve and why they should come to you, right? So if you are to use an example, a high net worth individual, right? You have certain needs and desires they are must haves in your financial institution. If you are a middle income, here in America, middle income person, you have different needs, and there are certain institutions that quite frankly they're not right for you. So making sure that the brand story that you're telling connects with that ideal audience, and that you are then working with your sales team, your frontline teams to respond to those people and support those ideal customers where they are. And that's really where like you do that brand awareness at the start, and then make sure that everything funnels through to that.
So before starting kind of B2B Better and before working in my previous role, I worked in B2C for about 3 years. I worked for a cycling company and we were FMCG, so we were selling maintenance products for bikes. Sounds boring, was pretty cool because we got to work with lots of amazing athletes who were using our kind of lubricant on their chains to get like 3 extra percentage points of output. But what I loved as a marketer in that environment was that things moved fast. Like you could test new ideas, you could iterate, you could kill campaigns quickly because volume you had volume of traffic kind of like working through the machine, which you don't really see in a lot of B2B environments. Like if you're talking long sales cycles, complex buying committees, it could be anything from 6 months, 3 years before you see a signed contract. In those environments, B2B marketers tend to overthink things a lot. So, what's your advice for the B2B marketers listening to this podcast in terms of what they should steal from the consumer marketing playbook that you learned during your time in your previous role?
Yeah, that is the big sticky wicket in the B2B, especially B2B SaaS, how slow and involved those processes are. And I've been on the side of the buyer, right? And buying online banking systems, that is a long RFP process. There's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of voices. And so it is difficult and it is risky from the marketing positioning side to adjust that ship, right, as you're going. But I think it just comes back to creating valuable content that you own, that people are going to listen to, that people are going to consume, right? I was thinking about this yesterday. How many times, I have filled out a form. Here's my email address. Give me your 100-page PDF of your report. How many times have I actually gone and read that report? Not many. Right. I don't have time to read 100 pages on my screen, right? But if you created a interview with someone who bought your product and the pain points that they had, and you hear that, whoa, that's exactly what I'm feeling. And understanding like their decision making, their buying process. So to get back to your question, I think it's really important for B2B marketers to be comfortable with pivoting quickly, just from a micro message standpoint. And what I mean by that is you've got your macro, right? Here's our ideal customer, here's our, theme, here's our brand message. But what's the nuance underneath that we can play with? And I think that's where the B2B marketers can be creative, because it's not changing the value prop. It's not changing the brand tagline and all those things that we all spend money and time on. But if we can truly understand what are the unique pain points of the individuals in the room who are going to have a vote in the decision-making process, and then create the content, create the resources to help them through that, then you can perform at speed and at scale.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Bringing it back to some numbers, again, one of the stats that kind of stood out to me was, you claim to cut CAC by 27% in just under 2 years, which congratulations, that is a feat. Walk me through what actually changed, because most marketers say, like, hey, look, we've optimized things, but they never actually explain what that meant.
Well, and we did optimize things, so we're gonna say that's absolutely true. But I should have asked this before we started. Am I allowed to say bad words on this
Yeah, of course.
show?
Yeah,
Okay,
you
so
should. And we're going to leave that in. We're gonna,
my
we're
my
gonna,
my fellow marketers are going to appreciate this. Part of the way that we were able to get to that place is every leader, most leaders I've come across, love billboards, right? They just love seeing their company on the billboard when they're driving down the highway. We said, fuck that. And we're done spending money on things that don't make sense. We invested in content. We created podcasts. We created videos. We created webinar series that we could then duplicate, reuse that content in a number of different ways, all tied back to who we're trying to reach and the value that we bring to our target markets. A billboard doesn't do that, right? It really doesn't. And so it was a reallocation of funds, and then making sure that we were producing things that were of value to not only our current member customers, but prospects and the folks in their circle, right? Investing where it made sense. And so while, yes, we were able to reduce CAC, everybody wants to reduce CAC. We did it in a smart way of just actually investing in the things that would drive long-term awareness and value to our prospects.
Mm. And I mean, how did you identify those things? Is it a case of just kind of trying out and running loads of kind of micro experiments, and then you kind of set some sort of, hey, if we see this type of indicator, like, then we know we should continue to double down? Or was it like, we're going to go big on one or two big channels for a quarter and then kind of go back and see what's working, what's not working? How do you evaluate?
Yeah, part of that is, again, understanding like who you're trying to reach, right? So one of the things that we knew we wanted to do was go young, right? And so that already like pivots you into certain channels against other channels, right? And then just through research in our, so using financial services, because that's obviously where I've spent the last decade. Go younger. Where are they consuming content? Where is there a gap in the content that's out there, right? And we tried to fill that gap with the stuff that we were creating, and it worked. Like we saw increased engagement, increased follow through, increased appointment creation for our physical branches for our target population. So it's just a matter of going back to who you want to reach. Where are they? What are those pain points, and how do you fill them? B2B is even tighter in terms of what they're willing to create at scale. You said it yourself. B2C, we can get creative. We can test something. If it's not working, you kill it and you move on with your day, right? And we did that. But it's all about setting those expectations at the beginning. We're going to try this. If it doesn't work, cool. Move on to the next thing on the to-do list, right?
Mm.
But when you start from that place of, we truly understand what we're trying to accomplish here and who we're trying to go after, we have been able to find success more often than not.
This kind of like segues into my next two questions. The first, which is around, to use your word, regulation, and the second one, which is around kind of personality versus professionalism. And so starting with the kind of, regulation piece, I guess. Financial services, obviously heavily regulated. You can't just go out there and say whatever you want, lest the hammer be brought down. I mean, you can't do anything, right? But
Right.
you won't have a job for much longer. Um, you know, I hear it all the time from the clients that we work with in B2B, which is that we've got some great ideas, but we just can't do it because of the red tape. Legal and compliance say no, basically. And so, what are your thoughts, and how do you kind of go about kind of being creative and differentiating a brand in an environment where maybe kind of every step along the way you need to get another line of approval?
I've made it a point in my career in the regulated space that my second best friend needs to be someone on the compliance team. And I've made it very clear to them that, like, look, my job is to get up to your red line, not cross it, but get up to it. And we'll do that
Yeah.
because their job is to protect the organization, my job is to help it grow, and together we'll get to it to a good place. And that's always worked really well, in my experience, because compliance wants us to be successful for the most part, right? They don't want to be the one saying no over and over and over again. Um, and so for us, in my experience, when I've approached it that way, I get more, I find more success. But from a creative standpoint, um, the first job I had in financial services, like their whole mantra was we wanted to do everything differently. Um, and our compliance team loved us and hated us because we would bring something to them, like, and their response would be, "Well, what'd you come up with today?" Um, and but they understood that that's what we were trying to do from a brand perspective, from a market positioning perspective. But we also had respect for, if we're going to put, to use FI as the example, if we're going to put rate in an ad, right, or in a piece, we knew what we had to do, right? We're not going to break the rules intentionally. Sometimes we did, and they would pull us back and correct those mistakes. But it really just comes from that position of mutual respect for what we're both trying to accomplish. And both sides can win. I firmly believe that.
Is there anything in terms of the kind of presentation of an idea to a compliance or a legal team that you would consider like best practice? Because I'm sure, okay, well, look, one example with a client, when I used to work in house, getting case studies was really hard because we worked in a heavily regulated industry. And so whenever I went to a compliance team and I said, hey, can we do a case study or a press release? They'd say no. We then launched a podcast. We want to interview our clients on this podcast. The way we package the idea is, hey, look, this is about giving you a platform so you can talk about the work that you are doing. What do you think? Oh yeah, that sounds fine. It's kind of like the same deal. We are getting someone to sit in front of a camera and talk about the work that we are doing. It's not about Trojan horsing them. It's not about kind of saying it's going to be one thing and then they arrive and it's something else. We're up front, like we're going to ask these questions, whatever. But it was almost like the packaging of it, and that this is about you rather than this is about us, suddenly got the idea over the line. And so, you know, when you're going to compliance teams, what's your thinking? Like, how do you present an idea to kind of maximize the chances of it getting approval?
That that's happened to us all, Jason. That is not a unique thing. Glad to hear other people experience the same thing we do. I think what has always worked best for me is anytime there's something that's going to be new, like a net new thing. This would be an example. Walking them through step by step and almost like giving them a piece of the pie a little bit each time. And that's more helping them put on their legal hat. Like, here's the first friction point you're going to have. Let's solve this one. And then we'll go to the, the next one. And then so like anytime we would run, sweepstakes or giveaways, like it's always like, hey, we want to do this thing. Here's what we're thinking. Where does your brain go? And so before we even bring them a finished proposal, a finished idea concept, we've already figured out what their initial concerns are and we address them, right? So then we bring the actual deal in front of them, the actual idea, and we've assuaged their concerns. And so we've kind of helped them help themselves get to yes. And so again, it just goes back to that partnership with them at the start of everything that we would try and do.
You mentioned there you kind of like, I'll take the team up to the red line, but I won't cross it. And then, a question later, you said sometimes I did go over the line intentionally and I kind of had to be pulled back. How did you think about like where that line is? Um, and how did you know that you had kind of crossed it?
Um, that's a great question. I mean, I always view my job as is to grow in a smart, safe way. But also be as creative as humanly possible. So, when it comes to marketing and FI, going back to one of the earlier questions, it is a commodity. So how do you make a commodity stand out? You've got to be creative. You've got to come up with unique hooks or unique rate structures or whatever the case may be. So sometimes we marketers and product owners don't always care about the compliance side until we create the idea, and then it's okay, compliance, figure out if we can do this or not. And there's been plenty of cases like that where, and then sometimes it's, yeah, no, that is not going to happen, or okay, we need to really think about what disclosures we need to have and what's the red tape that we need to put in. And again, that's their job. And they always come up with different questions than we even come up with. And that's why it's really important to have that partnership with your compliance legal team. I've never viewed a no as a no. It's a, well, what you've come up with doesn't meet our expectations or our guidelines. Okay, cool. We'll go figure out another way. It's no different than you're working with the prospective client. If they come back with no, not yet, okay. Sales teams don't hear that as a no. That's let's figure out a different path, right? It's no
Yeah.
different than with compliance teams.
As we look at kind of rounding out this episode, I want to finish up by just talking a little bit about if you're advising a kind of B2B SaaS company on what you've learned through your time kind of working predominantly on the consumer side, what do you think is the one thing that the majority of B2B companies are getting wrong about differentiation that the kind of B2C businesses learn about years ago?
So I'm going to say this at the start so people can decide if they want to listen or not. So I've never worked in a B2B SaaS organization or B2B in general. So it's always really been B2C with a little bit of nuance. But I really believe that we think as marketers too hard about our own products, right? Why does someone decide at noon today that I want a cheeseburger, right? Or why does someone decide I need to redo my decking, right? There's a reason, there's a pain point, there's something in their life that has caused them in that moment or over the course of weeks, that I need to make a change in something in my life or in my business. So what do my fellow marketers need to really do better at? It's just understand that people are buying with the emotion. There's emotion behind it, right? There's a problem, they need to solve it for them. It's that simple. Like, yes, the buying process is long. There's voices, there's committees, but at the end of the day, every product, every service that we sell has to solve a problem. So lean into that problem, lean into that pain, right? Because then you make someone the hero in their own business.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Like, it really grinds my gears when I hear people refer to B2B as kind of emotionless, and it's like purely driven by logic. I think if you're sat at a table where you're having to make a decision that's going to affect potentially thousands of people's lives, like maybe it's a piece of software that you're bringing in to an enterprise that's going to cost millions of dollars to implement, and you're the one making that decision, tell me there's no emotion, right? Tell me, even if it's the emotion of fear, like there's something there, and like that's kind of what you're saying, right? Like that's what you should be tapping into.
Yep. It is whether it's a fear thing or it's an opportunity thing, or I can, buy this product that doesn't catch on fire, or I can have this checking account that reimburses any ATM fee that I get when I, travel, right? There is some pain point that someone has, and it is that simple, no matter your product. And I think we get too cute sometimes. We're all guilty of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't help being cute, but that I take your point. Well, my wife would be rolling her eyes right now if she was on this call. Richard, thank you so much for taking us on this journey and for hopefully kind of opening the eyes of the B2B marketers listening to this podcast on how they can think about things a little bit differently. Your advice around don't overthink it, I think, is one that we can probably all not just apply to our work, but to our lives more broadly. And, I appreciate you coming onto the show. Where can people learn more about you? Where can they connect with you online?
You can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Richard Dedor around, so easy to find me.
Great. Well, we'll drop the link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes of this episode. But Richard, until next time, thank you for coming onto Pipe Dream.
Absolutely.